At Sunday dinner, my parents said my sister looked more like a bride and handed her the cap. Promise to me. I didn't yell. I built a new wedding crown and erased their names. I always thought some family traditions were sacred, a promise passed down through generations. But then, in one gut-wrenching moment, I realized my own mother was tearing mine apart, piece by agonizing piece, just to spite me. Sunday dinner at my parents' grand Victorian home in Springfield usually followed a predictable script. The comforting smell of pot roast and rosemary potatoes, Mom's insistence on using the good china, Dad's methodical carving of the meat. Even the drive over was routine, just 15 minutes across town. But that day, the air felt thick with something else. The front door stood ajar, and instead of Mom's usual immediate greeting, I heard laughter filtering down from upstairs. I slipped inside, my footsteps muffled by the antique Persian rug. "Hello." My voice echoed, unanswered. The laughter grew louder as I climbed the stairs, drawn like a moth to a flame toward Mom's bedroom. I paused at the threshold, feeling invisible for a moment. The heavy oak door framed a scene straight from my childhood nightmares. My sister, Phoebe, stood before Mom's ornate vanity, her chestnut curls, so like Grandma's in that old wedding portrait, arranged elegantly around her shoulders. But it was what sat atop her head that froze me mid-breath, the pearl-studded Juliet cap, its delicate beadwork catching the light. Mom hovered behind her, adjusting the cap with reverent fingers. "You were born to wear this," she whispered, her voice thick with approval. "Just look at how it frames your face." The antique pearls shimmered like dewdrops against Phoebe's dark hair. My stomach clenched. 20 years of cherished dreams disintegrated before my eyes. A small, involuntary gasp escaped my lips and Mom's eyes snapped to the doorway, finding me in the reflection. Her hands froze on the cap. "Oh, Emerson. We were just trying on some things for when Phoebe's day comes." Her voice had that brittle, artificial brightness she saved for truly uncomfortable situations. My mouth went bone dry. "But I'm getting married in 4 months," I stammered, my hand instinctively reaching for the engagement ring on my left hand. Phoebe turned, the cap still perfectly positioned. She laughed, a light, dismissive sound. "You never mentioned wanting it." "Not once." She touched one of the pearls with a manicured fingertip. "I didn't think I needed to," I replied, the words emerging softer than intended, even to my own ears. Mom's reflection showed a flicker of discomfort before she smoothed her expression. "This is a family tradition, dear. The cap goes to, well, the daughter who truly appreciates its history." I finished the sentence for her, mechanically, the daughter who truly appreciates its history. The familiar phrase landed like a stone in my chest. The room spun, and suddenly, I was 10 years old again, kneeling beside Grandma's cedar chest in the attic, the smell of mothballs and old wood filling my nostrils. The lid creaked as Grandma lifted it, revealing treasures wrapped in yellowed tissue paper. "What's this?" I'd asked, as she pulled out something delicate and shimmering. "This," Grandma said with reverence, "is the Juliet cap I wore when I married your grandfather." She placed it gently on my head, her eyes crinkling with delight. "Someday, when you're a bride, you'll wear it too." Later, she showed me photographs of her in 1952, radiant beside Grandpa, the pearl-studded cap holding her veil in place. I traced the image with my fingertip, memorizing every detail. For years afterward, I filled journal pages with drawings of my future wedding day, the pearl cap always the centerpiece. After Grandma's funeral, I watched Mom carefully preserve the cap, tucking it away for safekeeping. It was mine. The first signs that it wasn't came when I was 14. "Phoebe has the classic family features," Mom remarked at dinner, examining my sister's face with approval. "The Thompson cheekbones, Mother's eyes." That Christmas, Phoebe received Grandma's cameo brooch while I unwrapped a generic silver bracelet. At family gatherings, Phoebe's achievements, her perfect report card, her ballet recital, her winning science project, earned effusive praise. My academic honors and writing awards? Polite nods. "Phoebe is the spitting image of my mother," became Mom's constant refrain. I told myself it didn't matter. The cap was still mine, promised on that dusty afternoon. But now, the memory dissolved as Phoebe adjusted the cap in the mirror, tilting her head to admire how the pearls caught the light. "May I please wear it for my wedding to Daniel?" I asked quietly, my voice steady despite the frantic hammering in my chest. Mom's sharp intake of breath punctuated the silence. "Oh, Emerson, we couldn't risk damaging it," she said, as if explaining something obvious to a child. Phoebe removed the cap with careful hands, placing it on a velvet cushion. "Besides, it complements my features better," she added with a small shrug. "Everyone says so." The bedroom door swung wider as Dad entered, his Sunday paper tucked under one arm. "What's all this about?" he asked, surveying the scene with mild interest. "Emmy wants to wear grandmother's cap for her wedding," Mom explained. Dad's expression softened into that patient look he reserved for my impractical notions. "You know family traditions, Emmy," he said gently. "Some things just make sense a certain way." And in that moment, with crystal clarity, I understood. There was never any tradition about which daughter would wear the cap. The tradition was created for one purpose: to ensure I would never have it. The pearl-studded Juliet cap gleamed on its cushion, as far beyond my reach as the moon. 30 minutes later, the dining room clock ticked with maddening precision as Mom served pot roast onto bone china plates. Dad unfolded his napkin with the same methodical motion he'd performed every Sunday for 30 years. No one mentioned what had happened upstairs. "These potatoes are exceptional," Dad said, breaking the silence that stretched between us like a wire. "You've outdone yourself, Patricia." I pushed the food around my plate, my appetite completely gone. The image of Phoebe wearing Grandma's cap refused to fade. "Emmy, you've barely touched your dinner," Mom noted, her tone deliberately light. "Everything all right?" Before I could answer, Phoebe launched into a detailed account of her latest work project. I watched Mom's face transform with interest, nodding and asking questions. When was the last time she showed that level of engagement with my career? "Your sister's quite the rising star," Dad commented, beaming at Phoebe. Then he turned to me with a different expression, indulgent, almost patronizing. "You've never been one for sentimentality, Emmy, always so practical." The label stung because it was so fundamentally wrong. I've kept every birthday card, pressed flowers from significant moments, maintained journals since childhood. My apartment brims with mementos. Yet, in their narrative, I was the unsentimental daughter because it justified their blatant favoritism. "I'd lend you the cap," Phoebe offered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But traditions matter in this family, don't they, Mother?" Mom nodded, pleased. "Indeed they do. Didn't your grandmother always say the cap was for her first grandchild's wedding?" Aunt Vivian asked, reaching for her water glass. She'd arrived 15 minutes earlier, unaware of the incident, yet somehow she knew. She squeezed my hand under the table. The question dropped like a stone into still water. Mom's fork froze midway to her mouth. "More potatoes, anyone?" she asked, too brightly, rising from her chair. "Vivian, help me bring out dessert." As they disappeared into the kitchen, Dad checked his watch. "Cardinals game starts in 20 minutes. The next afternoon, I drove to Aunt Vivian's farmhouse, questions churning in my mind. Her porch swing creaked as we settled with glasses of sweet tea. "Your grandmother was very specific about her wishes," Aunt Vivian said, retrieving an old hat box from her hall closet. "Patricia knows this perfectly well." She placed a bundle of yellowed envelopes in my lap. The elegant, sloping script on them made my throat tighten. "Grandma's letters." "Go ahead," she encouraged. I opened the first envelope with trembling fingers. "My dearest Vivian," it read. "The Juliet cap should grace my first granddaughter's wedding day. Little Emmy has her heart set on it, and I've promised it to her. Make sure Patricia remembers this when the time comes." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I pulled out a faded photograph tucked inside, me at age 10, sitting on Grandma's lap, the pearl-studded cap tilted on my small head. Both of us beaming. "There are more," Aunt Vivian said softly. Letter after letter mentioned me by name, described my fascination with the cap, reiterated Grandma's promise. The final letter, dated just months before her death, was explicit. "The Juliet cap belongs to Emmy. She treasures its history more than anyone. Your grandmother intended it for you," Aunt Vivian confirmed, her hand warm on mine. Patricia deliberately reinterpreted her wishes. She's always favored Phoebe, though heaven knows why. Armed with this evidence, I visited my parents the next evening. Mom listened stiffly as I spread the letters on their kitchen table. "That's not what she meant," Mom said finally, barely glancing at them. "It's exactly what she meant. She names me specifically in every letter." Dad peered at one letter, then shrugged. "Can you just buy something similar? David's bridal must have options." The suggestion sliced through me. To him, one white headpiece was interchangeable with another, devoid of history or meaning. Phoebe entered the kitchen, assessed the situation, and immediately teared up. "You're trying to ruin my future wedding," she accused, her voice quavering perfectly. "This is so like you, Emmy. Always wanting what's mine." "What's mine?" The sheer audacity stole my breath. "Some traditions simply suit certain people better," Mom said, gathering the letters into a neat stack and handing them back to me. "I'm sorry you feel slighted, but my decision stands." I left without another word, unshed tears burning behind my eyes. Daniel held me that night at our apartment as I finally broke down, curled against him on our sofa. "I don't understand," I whispered between sobs. "Why has it always been like this?" His arms tightened around me. "Because they're wrong, Em. Not because you're unworthy." My phone buzzed with a text from Leanne. "Your mother called asking about rehearsal dinner preferences. I told her to talk to you directly." "What happened?" I called and explained everything. "They've always done this to you," she fumed. "Remember your high school graduation? Your mother spent the entire ceremony taking photos of Phoebe in the audience. The next day, Daniel's mother called. "I heard about the situation with your grandmother's cap," she said gently. "I have my mother's vintage hair clips. They'd complement your dress beautifully if you'd like to borrow them." Her kindness brought fresh tears. Even my wedding planner, Melissa, proved an unexpected ally. "Your wedding should reflect your story, not theirs," she said, showing me a portfolio of alternative headpiece options. "And honestly, we can design something even more meaningful." For the first time since Sunday, something inside me unclenched. "I'm not asking their opinion on the venue," I announced, surprising myself with my newfound firmness. Melissa smiled. "Good for you." The next milestone came during my dress fitting. In the bridal salon's private room, surrounded by mirrors and champagne flutes, the consultant adjusted my veil. "Any family heirlooms you'll be wearing?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. "I once dreamed of wearing my grandmother's pearl-studded Juliet cap," I admitted, my voice cracking slightly. In the changing room afterward, I broke down again. It was all I ever wanted for my wedding day, I confessed to Leanne, who held tissues and patience in equal measure. The consultant knocked gently before entering. "I couldn't help overhearing," she said, her eyes kind. "What does your perfect day actually look like?" The question stopped my tears. "I've been so focused on what's been taken that I haven't considered what I truly want," I answered slowly, realizing the truth of it only as the words emerged. "One where I recognize myself." She nodded, understanding something fundamental. "Then that's exactly what we'll create." Looking at my reflection, white gown shimmering under salon lights, I saw past the missing cap to the woman beneath. For the first time, I wondered if breaking free from their expectations might be a different kind of inheritance. One grandma would have valued even more than pearls. The next day, my phone buzzed for the 5th time in 20 minutes. I stared at the screen, watching Phoebe's name illuminate again. The Instagram notification beneath it read, "Phoebe Kelly tagged you in a post." My thumb hovered, a familiar sense of dread washing over me, before I finally tapped it. The photograph filled my screen. Phoebe, hair professionally styled, makeup flawless. Grandma's pearl-studded Juliet cap perched atop her head like a crown. The caption read, "The pearl-studded Juliet cap. Our family heirloom. Will be mine someday. Hashtag family tradition, hashtag heirloom jewelry, hashtag wedding traditions." The comments scrolled beneath like a chorus of approval. "You were born to wear it," wrote Aunt Meredith. "Just like your grandmother," added Cousin Rebecca. "Absolutely stunning on you," Mom had commented, adding a string of heart emojis. I set the phone face down on the kitchen counter, my hands trembling. The morning sunlight streaming through the window suddenly felt too bright, too intrusive. Daniel appeared at my side, his coffee mug pausing halfway to his lips when he saw my expression. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting his mug down to peer over my shoulder. I wordlessly turned the phone toward him. His jaw tightened as he read, eyes narrowing. A muscle worked in his cheek. "This is deliberately cruel," he said finally, his voice low with controlled anger. "They know you're getting married in 4 months. They know you wanted that cap." Maybe they forgot, I offered weakly, but the words tasted false even as I said them. Daniel's hand covered mine. "Emmy, don't do that. Don't make excuses for them." The buzzing continued as messages poured in from relatives. Aunt Vivian's text appeared. "Just saw Phoebe's post. Are you all right, dear?" At least someone remembered. 3 days later, I sat at the Springfield Country Club, surrounded by family celebrating my grandparents' 60th anniversary. The linen tablecloth felt crisp beneath my fingers as I twisted my napkin into a tight spiral. Across the table, Mom beamed as she accepted compliments about Phoebe, who wore a navy dress Mom had probably selected. "Phoebe will make such a beautiful, traditional bride," Great Aunt Martha announced to the table, patting Phoebe's hand. "She has the Kelly bearing, always has." Uncle James nodded sagely, "The perfect debutante bride of the future. Your mother showed me the photographs with the cap." "She'll wear Mother's cap just beautifully," Mom agreed, her voice carrying just enough to ensure I heard it. I pulled my phone from my purse, opening the wedding countdown app. The screen blinked back at me. 112 days. I'd been planning for years, dreaming since childhood, and now found myself without the one item I'd always envisioned as part of my day. Daniel squeezed my knee under the table, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Antique shops have always been my refuge, places where history is valued but not hoarded, where stories are meant to be continued, not locked away. The bell above Fairchild's Antiques jingled as I entered. Mrs. Fairchild, at least 80 with hands gnarled by arthritis, smiled at me from behind the counter. "Emerson, haven't seen you in weeks. How's the wedding planning coming along?" "It's progressing," I managed, not quite meeting her eyes. She studied me with the keen perception of someone who's witnessed decades of human emotion. "Come with me," she said suddenly, motioning toward the back room. "Got something new in yesterday." I followed her past cabinets of depression glass and vintage jewelry to a small display of wedding items. A collection of handkerchiefs with tatted edges, satin pillows, vintage cake toppers. "Something borrowed, something blue," Mrs. Fairchild murmured, carefully lifting a delicate handkerchief. But my attention had fixed on something else. In the corner sat a simple basket filled with bundles of dried baby's breath, the tiny white flowers still perfect despite their dried state. Mrs. Fairchild followed my gaze. "Ah, those. Simple beauty never goes out of style, does it? My assistant dried those herself." I lifted a bundle, the stems thin and delicate between my fingers, the tiny blossoms catching the light like miniature stars. "I wore wildflowers in my hair for my wedding," Mrs. Fairchild said, her voice softening with memory. "My mother had this elaborate tiara that had been in our family for generations. Everyone expected me to wear it." My head snapped up. "But you didn't?" "No." Her smile deepened the wrinkles around her eyes. "I looked at myself in that tiara and saw my mother, my grandmother, everyone but me. So I walked into a field the morning of my wedding and gathered wildflowers instead." "What did your mother say?" I asked, barely breathing. Mrs. Fairchild laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "Oh," she was furious. "But Harry, my husband, he said I'd never looked more beautiful." She paused, patting my hand. 63 years we had together before he passed. Not once did he mention wishing I'd worn that tiara. I purchased 3 bundles of baby's breath, cradling them like precious cargo as I left the shop. For the first time in weeks, a sense of possibility unfurled within me. Authenticity over tradition. The phrase echoed in my mind, a revelation. That evening, Daniel called with news. "I met with that florist today, the one in Auburn," he said. "She completely understands what we're going for. No fussy arrangements, nothing overdone." "You did that without telling me?" I asked, surprised. "I wanted it to be a surprise. Your mother kept sending those links to that florist she knows. Marjorie? I supplied automatically. Mom's bridge partner who specializes in elaborate cascading bouquets that cost more than my monthly rent. Yeah, her. Anyway, this florist I found, Tessa? She's amazing. Says she can incorporate whatever elements matter to you. No pressure from anyone. Later that night, Leon texted me links to independent dressmakers. Just options, her message read. Places your mom doesn't have on speed dial. My future mother-in-law called the next morning. Daniel mentioned there might be some tension about venues. She began carefully. Robert and I would love to offer our garden. Spring flowers will be at their peak in 4 months. My wedding planner emailed a list of photographers, caterers, and musicians, all small businesses, none connected to my family's social circle. Vendors who will respect your vision, she wrote. People who listen to you. I stood in my living room, surrounded by these messages, these offers, these people who were creating a protective circle around my wedding day, around me. The realization washed over me like warm water. I have people who see me. That evening, I sat cross-legged on my living room floor. The bundles of baby's breath spread before me. With careful fingers, I began weaving the stems together, forming a delicate crown. The dried flowers were surprisingly sturdy yet light. I imagined wearing this instead of the pearl-studded cap, a crown of my own making. My phone rang. Mother's name appeared on the screen. I took a deep breath before answering. Emerson, I've been thinking about the rehearsal dinner seating. The Hawthorns should be at table 1, of course, and we'll need to separate the Millers from the Westons after that unfortunate incident at the charity gala. Daniel and I have already decided on the seating arrangements, I interrupted, my voice steady. The silence that followed stretched like taffy. But we always handle these arrangements, Mom finally said, confusion evident in her tone. Not this time, I replied, gentle but firm. I twisted another stem into my growing crown. We're keeping things simple, just close friends and family at one long table. But that's not how It's how we're doing it, I said, surprised by the quiet authority in my voice. I should go. Daniel and I are meeting with a photographer tonight. After we hung up, I held the completed baby's breath crown up to the light. It was delicate yet surprisingly strong, just like the small seed of resolve growing within me. I walked to the mirror in my hallway and placed it atop my head. The dried white flowers framed my face like a constellation of tiny stars. For the first time in months, I recognized myself. The next day, I spread a mood board across my dining table. Photos of garden weddings, simple table settings with wildflowers in mason jars, bridesmaids in mismatched dresses the color of spring leaves. No crystal candelabras, no formal 5-course meals, no family crest embossed on every surface. Daniel leaned over my shoulder, his hand squeezing mine as he surveyed the images. This is us, not them, he said softly. Later that afternoon, I approved the final design for our wedding invitations. The simple cardstock featured pressed wildflowers instead of the Kelly family crest. There was no mention of Mr. and Mrs. Robert Kelly request the honor of your presence. Instead, it simply read, Emerson and Daniel invite you to celebrate their marriage. I ran my fingertip over the raised texture of the dried flowers pressed into the paper. This wedding will be ours. This life will be ours. And I will be recognizable to myself within it. Mom arrived at my apartment unannounced, her knuckles rapping against my door with familiar authority. I barely had time to set down my coffee mug before she swept inside, Chanel No. 5 perfume announcing her presence. I've been thinking about your wedding dress, she announced, settling onto my sofa uninvited. Her cream-colored purse rested primly on her lap. I spoke with Madame Rousseau about altering my dress for you, the same dress she'd been pushing since Daniel proposed, a confection of lace and beading that belonged in her wedding album, not mine. I already have a dress, Mother. I busied myself collecting stray magazines from the coffee table, avoiding her eyes. But tradition, Emerson. She emphasized my full name, the way she always did when displeased. A Kelly bride and something borrowed. Something borrowed. Like the cap she promised Phoebe. Her phone chimed. She glanced at the screen, then quickly tucked it away, but not before I caught the photographer's name. Did you just contact James Preston? My voice sounded steadier than I felt. A flicker of discomfort crossed her face before she composed herself. Well, that boy you hired with the artistic notions. Trevor. His name is Trevor. The room suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing inward. Did you cancel my photographer? James has done all our family events since your graduation, she said, as if this explained everything. He knows our good angles. I walked to the kitchen, needing distance. Mother, I said, turning, I need you to leave. The shock on her face was palpable, but she left. However, between the cutting board and knife block sat today's mail, including an envelope in Dad's distinctive handwriting. Inside, a check for $5,000 with a note reading for a proper wedding. Love, Dad. My phone buzzed 10 minutes later. Phoebe's tearful voice filled the speaker when I answered. Emmy, please. She hiccuped dramatically. Mom's beside herself. You're tearing the family apart with this rebellion. The word hung between us. Rebellion. As if choosing my own photographer, my own dress, my own vision was an act of war. I'm getting married, Phoebe, I said quietly. Not starting a revolution. After she hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a note to Dad. Thank you for your generosity. We've got this covered. I tucked his check inside, sealed the envelope. No anger, no accusations, just boundaries, finally erected after 31 years. The wedding planning website asked for my password. I changed it to something Mom would never guess. Daniel and Emerson, only 2025. And I sent Trevor an email confirming our agreement with a postscript. Please direct all communication through me personally. No family interference. In the evening quiet, Daniel and I relocated our rehearsal dinner to Riverview Gardens, a place only our closest friends knew about. I made reservations under his last name. Are you okay? Daniel asked, his hand warm against my back as we finalized the details. Better than okay, I answered, surprised to find it was true. I closed my journal where I'd written, my wedding will be authentic, not performative. The next morning brought an unexpected call. Margaret Holloway's voice, wavering with age but clear with purpose, filled my ear. Grandma's friend, calling from her retirement home in Oak Ridge. I saw Phoebe's post about that cap, she said without preamble. Your grandmother would be so proud of you, standing your ground. You knew about the cap? My throat tightened. Elizabeth always said it was for you. She told me how you sat for hours drawing it in your little notebooks. Margaret's voice softened. Some people rewrite history to suit themselves, Emerson. Doesn't make it true. After that, wedding RSVPs began arriving directly to my email rather than through Mom, Aunt Joanne, Uncle William, cousins I hadn't spoken to in months. Each message carried subtle solidarity. Dad appeared at my office Thursday lunch hour, awkwardly holding a paper bag containing a sandwich from my favorite deli. Your mother means well, he began, his standard opening when peacemaking. The fluorescent lights highlighted the gray in his hair. I know she does, Dad. I accepted the sandwich, but not the excuse. That evening, my phone chimed with a text from cousin Stella. Can I be seated away from Aunt Patricia? Like you? I need some space. I stared at the message, understanding blooming like a time-lapse flower. I wasn't alone in finding the family dynamics suffocating. Others had felt it too, had been waiting for someone to break the pattern. The final dress fitting felt like victory. No mother hovering with suggestions, no Phoebe commenting on how certain styles might be more flattering. Just me and a seamstress who smiled approvingly at my reflection. The gown fell in simple lines, the ivory satin catching light without sequins or beads. My shoulders looked stronger than I remembered, my posture straighter. You look like yourself, my wedding planner, Tessa, said quietly. On the vintage vanity sat my creation, a delicate crown of baby's breath with tiny vintage pearl pins nestled among the white blooms. Not an heirloom passed down, but something new, created with my own hands. I placed it carefully on my head, the weight familiar from practice. In the mirror, I saw a woman I recognized, someone who makes her own choices. This feels right, I whispered, and for the first time in months, I smiled without reservation. In the weeks to come, I meticulously organized and confirmed everything for my wedding. This time, I chose myself and my future husband. The evening before the wedding arrived, with Mom appearing at my apartment door one final time. She held a familiar box, its velvet covering worn at the corners. "I've brought the Juliet cap," she said, her voice strained with effort, "just in case." I looked at the box, at the treasure I once coveted, then at my mother's expectant face. "Thank you," I said gently, "but I've made my choice." Confusion clouded her eyes. "But it's what we've always done." I thought of the baby's breath crown waiting for tomorrow, of the decisions made without family approval, of the boundaries finally established. "It's what you've always wanted," I corrected her softly. Something shifted in her expression, the first fragile recognition that maybe, just maybe, there was a difference. Morning sunlight filtered through the oak trees, casting dappled patterns across the garden behind my childhood home. I sat on a wrought iron bench, still in my robe, watching butterflies dance between the hydrangeas. For the first wedding morning in Kelly family history, there was no frantic rush, no precisely timed appointments, no mother herding bridesmaids with military precision. "Water." Leanne appeared beside me, offering a crystal tumbler with cucumber slices floating on top. "Thanks." The cool glass felt reassuring against my palm. "Is it strange that I'm not nervous?" Leanne settled beside me, her bridesmaid dress a soft sage green that complemented the garden. "Not strange. Perfect." Across the lawn, my bridesmaids arranged wildflowers in mason jars wrapped with simple twine. No formal bouquets, no color-coordinated ribbon cascades, just blooms gathered fresh that morning. The absence of Mom's preferred florist felt like oxygen. "Ready for your crown?" Leanne held up the delicate circle of baby's breath I'd crafted. Tiny white blossoms intertwined with ivy sprigs, secured with nearly invisible wire. Nothing like the elaborate pearl-studded Juliet cap I'd dreamed about for 20 years. I nodded, closing my eyes as she placed it gently on my head. The weight was almost non-existent, yet I felt its presence like an anchor to this moment, this choice, this freedom. "Take a look." Leanne guided me to the vintage standing mirror we'd positioned beneath the maple tree. The woman reflected back surprised me. My simple silk dress fell in clean lines, unadorned except for vintage buttons down the back. My hair framed my face in loose waves rather than Mom's preferred structured updo. The baby's breath crown sat like morning frost, delicate and ephemeral. "I recognize myself," I whispered. A slight movement in the mirror's edge caught my attention. Mom stood in the doorway, watching. Her expression shifted between confusion and something else I couldn't quite name. She was wearing the navy dress she bought for Cousin Rachel's wedding, her pearls perfectly aligned at her throat. Her hands gripped her elbows as if holding herself together. She opened her mouth to speak, then seemed to think better of it, retreating inside without a word. "You okay?" Leanne asked, adjusting a strand of my hair. "Surprisingly, yes." And I meant it. The garden transformed throughout the morning. White market lights strung between trees, simple wooden chairs arranged in a semicircle, a handcrafted arch covered with greenery. No grand floral arrangements, no monogrammed aisle runner, no string quartet. Just the garden where I'd spent childhood summers reading under trees, while Phoebe practiced ballet poses on the lawn for Mom's approving gaze. Daniel waited beneath the arch, his grandfather's pocket watch chain just visible against his vest. When our eyes met across the garden, his smile broke like sunrise. No rehearsal dinner disaster, last-minute vendor crisis, or family drama could dim the certainty in his eyes. I spotted Phoebe's arrival from my hiding place near the kitchen door. She was overdressed in a formal cocktail dress and heels that sank slightly into the grass with each step. Her discomfort was visible as she navigated the informal setting, glancing around as if expecting to find familiar trappings of Kelly family events. "Ready?" Dad appeared beside me, adjusting his tie nervously. We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken conversations between us. He looked at me properly for what felt like the first time in years. "Emmy," he began, then stopped himself. His eyes drifted to the baby's breath crown, then back to my face. "You look like your grandmother right now." My breath caught. "Is this another comparison where I'll fall short?" "Not because of any heirloom," he continued softly, "but because of your grace. The words landed like pebbles in still water, sending ripples through years of collected disappointments. Did you know she wanted me to have the cap? I couldn't help asking. I suspected he offered his arm. But I've never been brave enough to challenge your mother on things that matter. We began walking toward the waiting guests, my hand resting lightly on his sleeve. And now? Now I see what courage looks like. His voice roughened. I'm sorry it took so long. The path to Daniel felt both endless and instantaneous. When I reached him, his hands closed around mine like coming home. Our vows contained no mention of family traditions or proper roles. Instead, we promised partnership, growth, and the creation of our own path forward. When Daniel spoke of your quiet strength these past months, tears sprang to my eyes. He'd seen the battle behind my peaceful exterior, the determination beneath my smile. Applause surrounded us as we shared our first kiss as husband and wife. I caught glimpses of unexpected expressions, Great Aunt Martha nodding with approval, Uncle James wiping a suspicious moisture from his eye, Dad standing straighter than he had in years. At the reception, conversations flowed around me like water. Most authentic wedding I've attended in decades, said Mrs. Whitaker, Mom's garden club rival. Your grandmother had that same spirit, added Uncle Thomas, pressing my hand. She never did care much for pomp. The photographer captured moments I never planned. Daniel spinning me under apple trees, Leon laughing with my cousins, guests dancing barefoot on the grass. Not a single staged family portrait with forced smiles and perfect posture. From across the garden, I noticed Mom overhearing guests praising the refreshing simplicity and genuine warmth of our celebration. Her face told a complex story I couldn't fully read. As evening descended and market lights twinkled overhead, Phoebe approached, clutching a familiar velvet box. You don't need the cap, she said quietly. You never did. I waited, sensing there was more. I was jealous, she continued, tears brightening her eyes. Not of the cap, but of how you always knew yourself. I only knew who they wanted me to be. She extended the box. Grandmother would want you to have this. I know that now. The moment stretched between us, the cap finally within my grasp, the dream suddenly within reach. I placed my hand on the box, but didn't take it. Keep it, I said gently. I've found my own way. As Phoebe's fingers tightened around the velvet box, I noticed for the first time how young she looked beneath her perfect makeup, how uncertain beneath her practiced confidence. The crown of baby's breath sat light upon my head as I turned back toward my husband and our future, blooming where I've chosen to plant myself. 6 months later, the Christmas tree in our living room stood adorned not with expensive ornaments, but with memories. Wedding photos hung between twinkling lights, my baby's breath crown clearly visible in each frame. Daniel adjusted a handmade ornament, a miniature wreath of dried flowers, before stepping back to admire our handiwork. First Christmas as the Thompsons, he said, wrapping his arm around my waist. No dress codes, no assigned seating, no mandatory gift exchange. I leaned against him, savoring the peaceful quiet of our home. The dining table awaited our guests with mismatched vintage plates I'd collected from thrift stores, no family china in sight. The gifts beneath our tree were mostly experiences, concert tickets, cooking classes, weekend getaways, rather than objects that gather dust. When the doorbell rang, I didn't rush to smooth my hair or check my lipstick. The woman who opened the door was someone my family might not recognize, confident, relaxed, unburdened by the need for approval. The evening unfolded without the familiar tension. No one criticized the cranberry sauce or questioned my choice of centerpiece. When Dad asked about our honeymoon hiking trip in Colorado, he actually listened to my answer instead of waiting for his turn to speak. The phone rang 3 days later. Mom's name appeared on the caller ID. Would you show me how to make that crown? Her voice carried a note I'd never heard before. The one you wore at your wedding. It was distinctive. From Mom, this was practically a declaration of surrender. At the family New Year's gathering, I found myself in the garden with my 16-year-old cousin Sarah, teaching her to weave wildflowers into a simple circlet. Her fingers fumbled with the stems, but her face glowed with concentration. Aunt Patricia always says I should wear my hair up to look more elegant, she confessed, but I feel more like me when it's loose. I handed her another daisy. Then wear it loose. Phoebe arrived, wearing jeans instead of her usual cocktail dress. When Uncle James remarked on her casual appearance, she shrugged. I wanted to be comfortable. Our eyes met across the patio. Something had shifted. Months later, for our first anniversary, Daniel and I returned from a trip. I found this at your grandmother's friend Martha's house, he explained as I unwrapped a framed photograph of Grandma in her garden, hands dirty from planting, face alight with joy. No pearl cap, no formal pose. I turned the frame over and discovered a note in familiar handwriting to my Emerson, who always saw beauty in simplicity. Tears blurred my vision as understanding washed over me. The real heirloom was never the pearl-studded cap. It was her spirit, authentic, unbound by others' expectations. That evening, I placed fresh baby's breath beside my preserved wedding crown, now displayed in a shadow box on our wall. In the mirror behind it, I caught a glimpse of my smile, so like Grandma's in the photograph. My journal sat open on the desk, today's entry still drying. Heirlooms aren't always objects. When the phone rings with Mom's caller ID, I answer with peaceful certainty. The woman I've become doesn't need anyone's approval to recognize her own worth. Sometimes, an heirloom is not about the object itself, but about how you hold on to dignity and authenticity in the face of family expectations.